Welcome to episode 2 of the creatively named The 11 Warriors Show. I'm Jason Priestess. That's Chris Lauterbach. Happy Wednesday morning to you all. Chris, Monday morning news I didn't think I'd wake up to. Kyle McCord in the transfer portal. Did you expect that? Or was I felt like it caught me completely off guard.
Yeah, well, I feel like we talked about it on the show last Wednesday, and we weren't thinking that was going to happen. Hadn't even had, that press conference yet, all those other. I feel like I said, hey, game one next year, I would expect Kyle McCord to start. So that turned out to be a pretty hot take pretty quickly. But yeah, did not see that coming. Now in hindsight, after Ryan Day's press conference on Sunday, after the bowl, announcements and all that, it doesn't seem quite so crazy
Right.
the way he was talking. I'm sure we'll get into that. But yeah, very crazy times in Buckeye Land, thinking about your starting quarterback this year transferring, along with a host of other guys. 9 other guys, something like that.
Yeah, you just touched on it, man. Despite starting 12 games and going, 11-1 as a starter this season, Day on Sunday in his Cotton Bowl presser would not commit to McCord as the starter next season, or not even really for the bowl game. Just kind of like talked around it, said they need to evaluate everything, and that is part of everything. And the next morning, McCord is in there in the portal really early. I mean, it was like I think I got the news like around 7 a.m. on Monday morning. Kind of caught everyone off guard, and this is a guy who completed 66% of his passes for about 3,200 yards, 24 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. Had a decent year. We've talked many times on 11 Warriors on this show, on some other stuff about his progression struggles and things like that, but did not expect this. And, this is a guy who had 2 key interceptions in the 30-24 loss in Ann Arbor at the end of November, team's 3rd straight loss. And he's out, said he wanted to explore other quarterback options. There's word out there now that Nebraska might be a fit. I guess he spoke to the offensive coordinator in Nebraska. But, man, what a tough business, huh?
Yeah, I mean, that's the way it is these days with these kids being able to transfer and be eligible the next year. And more power to them, by the way. I have zero, problem with it. We've talked forever. If coaches can leave, players should be able to leave too. And to me, it just comes down to I'm just super curious is, the way Day talked in his press conference, it seemed you could certainly make the argument that either he told Kyle to explore options, or he at least could not promise Kyle that he would be the starter next year, or maybe even all the way to he feels like he already knows who his starter next year is, whether it's someone in the portal or someone on the current team. I don't know. I'm curious what you think, because again, in that press conference, you would have at least thought that Kyle's going to start this bowl game, or something like, or at least I did.
Yeah, absolutely.
And to not commit to any of that, and then, like I said, the next morning he transfers. I guess do you think Day was surprised by that, or do you think Day knew on Sunday that was going to happen, and that was part of why the press conference went the way it did?
I don't know. That's a great question. I mean, I wonder if that's something we'll never truly know, whether Day knew and was involved in that decision. Because you technically don't have to tell your coach. You can just put your name in the portal and say, I want to transfer, and they find out that way. But you would hope, though, with the relationship those two have, and I know Day can be, tough and demanding on quarterbacks, but still there's a bond there, and you would hope that Kyle would have talked to him about this. But at the same time, see people quit jobs all the time without 2 weeks, so that's functionally the same thing. That's a great question, man.
That's an interesting point. That it doesn't really owe anybody anything. I don't know. I just feel like in this business, whether you're a coach or a player, going out of your way to torch bridges probably isn't the best move either. And McCord seems like a pretty mature, kid from my perspective. I don't know. What do we know, right? But I can't imagine a scenario where they did not chat. Even if Day was somewhat surprised of timing or something like that. I don't know. I have to believe a conversation took place that, was something to the effect of, hey, I can't make a guarantee to you about next year kind of thing. Right. Whether he's got somebody lined up or not. Did they really not talk about that at all? I don't know. Who knows, right? But that would really surprise me.
Maybe we'll find out someday if Kyle decides to write a book or gives his first interview once he gets to Nebraska, or we'll have to see how it shakes out. Ohio State is expected to explore quarterback options in the portal. They're looking right now. Some names out there. Dylan Gabriel is thought to be the top quarterback prospect, left Oklahoma. Considering Oregon, he's looking up there right now. Cam Ward, Washington State, another really good quarterback, passed for almost 3,700 yards last year. Duke's Riley Leonard. Dante Moore at UCLA, who news is out that he's flirting with Michigan, so You know, we could have a situation with Cam Ward lands in Columbus, Dante Moore of UCLA lands in Michigan, and we do kind of welcome the Pac Bros in a little quicker than we thought, right?
Yeah, well, Dante Moore at Michigan, like I could see that maybe if McCarthy's going to leave, but Moore's got like 3 years eligibility left, right? Like I guess before you go through any more of the rundown, like I guess I envision if Day thinks his solution is in the portal, I don't think we're looking at a guy that's got, multiple years, certainly not 3 years of eligibility. I think it would probably have to be 2 max, or you're jeopardizing if Aaron Nolan wants to stay here, or, maybe some of the other guys too. But certainly Nolan, I think, is the, at least recruiting crown jewel of the quarterbacks you've got in play right now for the future. Seems like they'd be very careful not to jeopardize that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a delicate dance, man. You need a guy for next season, whether that's Devin Brown or Aaron Nolan or Lincoln Keenholz, or someone in the portal. But you can't maybe take someone in the portal that kind of contradicts some of the stuff you've put out there in recruiting about guys for the future. I mean, I guess you could, but you have to be very careful about that, right? Yeah,
absolutely. He's got a tough task. It's one thing when you lose an offensive tackle or some of those things, but when you're talking about the most important position in the sport, it's just funny. Fans were so fickle. Want him out of here, want him out of here, want him out of here kind of thing. At least a certain faction was pretty diehard about that.
Right.
Now it's like, what do we do now?
He was a good guy. I really liked him, man. He handled himself with class. These same people that are bombing him. No, he's just like funny, a good dude.
Yeah, right. The more I think about it in hindsight, now that he is obviously entering the portal, and you just look at some of those sidelines, like even in the Michigan game, right? Like you could see when McCord was coming off the field, Day was fired up, and it didn't seem like he was so fired up necessarily about like where the ball was placed. It was more about decisions that were being made.
Right.
And, like even that slant to Marvin, it's just like, we're sitting there like, could Marvin deflect this or, that kind of stuff. But it would seem pretty clear that he'd already decided before the ball was ever snapped. Yep, that's where I'm going. And at the same time, you've seen footage of guys open in other areas. And that's always tricky, right? Because you never know what read that person is or, it's easy to armchair quarterback, that kind of stuff. But I don't know, just the more you look back at some of the things you've seen over the course of the season and now he's transferred, it just more feeds into me like, were they just not on the same page? Or again, was Day just based off of what he saw? Feels like I did a heck of a good job to get him to this point, and I'm not sure how much more he could elevate his game. Again, we may never know, but it just makes you wonder that much more, knowing that, to your point, it wasn't like he put up, awful numbers, and he had some moments, right? He's got a big time arm. He can make some big time throws, but can he bring all of that together? Did Day think he couldn't and wanted to move on? Or did McCord feel like, maybe you don't think that, and I think I can, and I'll go prove it somewhere else? I hope we find out at some point.
Yeah, for sure. Speaking of next year, we talked about Aaron Nolan, the freshman coming in at quarterback. What a great name for a QB too, Air. I mean, that guy, if he doesn't clean up with some NIL opportunities, I'll be very disappointed. But next year, even talking short term, man, for the Cotton Bowl, McCord's out now. He's not going to play for Ohio State in the Cotton Bowl while he's in the portal. So looking at sophomore Devin Brown, freshman Lincoln Keenholz, who I know they really like around there, and obviously transfer Tristan Gebbia still got one game in the holster, I believe. So if you need him, he's available. What do you want to see in the Cotton Bowl at quarterback?
Honestly, I would like to see both. I mean, to me, this is obviously an exhibition game at this point, so I do want to see both. I feel like Brown, obviously missed a lot of time with, the injury and kind of got behind the 8 ball there. I don't know from what we saw that I'm like bullish about Devin Brown being the guy next year, if I'm being honest. I feel like his turnovers were different than McCord's. He's a little bit more likely to fumble, just a little bit more loose with the ball maybe. Both had periods of inaccuracy, but I felt like McCord, like wild inaccuracy, but I feel like McCord had the ability to make some throws, and I haven't had a chance to see if McCord can do or not. And then Keenholz obviously being the younger guy, only getting to see a couple snaps of him, but you hear a lot of noise, from inside the WAC that this is a kid that's impressed some people. Would definitely like to get a view from him. But honestly, I mean, if I'm being real, I'm hoping that Ohio State's quarterback next year we don't know who it is yet, because I struggle to think either one of those two are going to have a better season than McCord, if I'm being real.
Right. Yeah, we'll have to see what shakes out. 12 Buckeyes in the portal already, much more than all of last season. We talked about McCord. Julian Fleming, another guy in the portal. Surprise you?
A little bit. Yeah, he's probably the one guy on that list besides McCord, obviously, that at least was a guy you kind of knew what you were going to get. At this point, though, I feel like if you're an elite team, he's probably your third receiver. If he's your first or second receiver, I'm not sure if you have an elite receiving core. Had some injuries. I think he's a really good downfield blocker. I will say that. I think he's done a great job in the run game, for sure. And he's been an effective target. I'm not trying to poo-poo Fleming, but when you think about recruiting, the stars, where he was at, where he was ranked, he's never quite lived up to that. And, I know at least one former Buckeyes kind of challenged Hartline in the receiving room and development or whatever, but I would like Fleming to come back, don't get me wrong, but I think that's a place where, you still probably have a good chance to absorb it.
Yeah, it would be kind of fun to see him go back to Penn State. He grew up in Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
Lord knows they need receivers. They need some stuff on offense, and that would be kind of a neat storybook ending for him. Wish him all the best. Absolutely. Running back Evan Pryor, another guy. Center Jacob James, Victor Cutler, Amari Abor, Ryan Turner, Jair Brown, Cam Martinez, Kai Stokes, and kicker Parker Lewis. So a couple cornerbacks, a couple centers, a couple safeties, defensive end here and there, and then obviously a kicker. Two things just jump out to me right now, and it's just not Ohio State. You're seeing it from a lot of schools too. They've done pretty well in retaining guys in the past, but this year it seems like a lot of them are out there. College free agency, let's just call it what it is. College free agency is nuttier, 5 times nuttier than NFL free agency any day of the week. Because there's, any pro sport, there's guys that are available to be free agents, and not everyone can be a free agent in college football. And the other thing that jumps out is Ryan Day has a very pivotal offseason ahead of him, and how he navigates some of this turbulence, some of this roster turnover. He's a smart guy. He anticipates some of this stuff, but he'll have his work cut out for him.
Oh, I don't think there's any doubt. I think, high level, you look at that list of names you rattled off, and there's no one that was going to be, a guaranteed starter next year with the exception of Fleming. Again, we've already talked about McCord, and even him, I don't think you could say was surefire. Fleming was still going to start next year. The other guys, I don't know that, you can necessarily say that. So I don't think it's huge there. Depth perspective, though, you're losing some guys to your point. Yeah, some guys coming in are going to have to step up, but through the portal, you're going to need some folks to replace guys that were going to give you depth. I mean, I think, like I said, on the surface, you look at like a Jair Brown, you look at a Ryan Turner, you look at a Kai Stokes. Those are guys that, I think have already been passed by guys younger than them for the most part, right? I mean, you think about, Sonny Styles and Malik Hartford at safety, you think about what Jermaine Matthews is showing at corner, Hancock's back, Igbenogsen's back, you assume Hancock will be back, Lorenzo Styles Jr. is back, Calvin Simpson-Hunt is a young kid that's passed up those guys in the rotation, so I'm not surprised that they went. Probably the same thing for Reed Carrico, right? I mean, Simon,
didn't even mention it.
Could be back, but you got Hicks, you got Powers that are already ahead of those guys on the depth chart. So it's, again, not to dismiss any of those guys. I think they're depth, but none of them are going to be starters. And I think they could go somewhere else and be starters. And they're probably right? Especially some of the offers they're getting. I feel like every defensive back, Boston, Hafley's offered, right, from Boston College. So they might be able to go there and start. So, not surprised by some of those names, but it does put a lot of pressure on Day. Like you said, they never lost as many in the portal. One of them also happens to be your starting quarterback. So, it would be big even if they beat Michigan this year. But the fact that you didn't win the Big Ten again, you're playing an exhibition bowl game, a lot of pressure on him to, initially you're just talking about coaches and getting that right. Now it's like, hey, you got to think through, all this roster turnover as well.
Right. Absolutely. One thing I want to jump back real quick before we move on. Didn't touch on this, but Fleming leaving, you're looking at Brandon Ennis and Carnell Tate, 2 freshmen that kind of showed a little bit this year, is stepping up next year with Marv gone and obviously Fleming in the portal. Ohio State believes there's a small chance Emeka Egbuka comes back next season.
Yeah.
And right now he's the late round first pick, 26, 28, somewhere in that region, depending on the mocks you look at. But if he falls to the second, there's a chance he's in play. And I'm wondering kind of if Fleming was seeing that as well.
Yeah, that could be another domino for him for sure. Could be. I had Egbuka, kind of jotted down off to the side here as well of just, hey, question mark, like what, what's going to happen with that? I feel like, gun to your head, he's probably going to leave, but it wouldn't shock me if he came back. I mean, was injured this year. He could probably bolster his stock. I think he'd probably want to know who the hell the quarterback's going to be before he would make that commitment probably. But, like you said, Cardell Tate, Brandon Ennis, Noah Rogers, Ballard probably be back. We'll see. You got Graves, you got, Kojo Antwi. There's guys there for sure. But Fleming was ahead of almost all of those guys, right? So he was going to play a lot. But yeah, Ibuka, that'll be really, really interesting to see. I think we would totally be guessing at this point. But yeah,
Yep.
I just until I hear otherwise, I would assume that he's gone just because of, like you said, I mean, probably worst case, you're looking at a second round pick, and I can't begrudge anybody.
No.
If you're a 6th pick, I wouldn't begrudge you. But if you're a second round pick, and certainly, at worst, you could make the case that it's still smart to go now.
Yeah, absolutely. Touched on that Cotton Bowl. It's out. The CFP field is out. Number 7 Ohio State will face number 9 Missouri in the Cotton Bowl, and we'll get into much more of the breakdowns on the the rosters and the offenses and defenses and how they match up in subsequent shows. But man, just hard to get hyped for that one. It's on the 29th of December. It's even
Friday
2 days.
Night banger. Yeah.
It's 2 days away from the first. It's like, you already have Chop saying he's going to the NFL, so he's not probably going to play. You got Marv, who, let's just put it out there, as a 0% chance Marv will play in this game, and a 0% chance he'll return next season. Just didn't want to throw that out there for anyone. Someone asked me the other day, what's the chance Marv comes back? I'm like, 0. Just 0.
Right.
I promise you it's 0. It's no more than 0. But yeah, man, just hard to get hyped for this one. Ohio State, all the guys in the portal, we have other guys sitting out. Line open is Ohio State -6.5. It's now Missouri -1 because of McCord and some of these other factors. Like I said, we'll get into much more of the breakdowns in later shows. But first thoughts on the Cotton Bowl.
Yeah, like you said, I mean, it's an exhibition game. It is what it is. To me, I'm at the point where, the Rose Bowl was the Rose Bowl. So even though it was an exhibition, it was still the Rose Bowl. You still had Stroud. But you were excited to see what Marvin could do in a more extended look, see what Egbuka was going to do in a more extended. Obviously, Smith and Jigba went wild, but
right.
Yeah, I think that if you're a casual fan, then 1, you're probably not watching this, but 2, you're not as interested in this bowl game, right? Like it's not the playoff, but for, I think, folks that are a little bit more diehard, to me, it's like, hey, this is the first game of 2024 is the way you've got to look at it, right? It's like, hey, I don't want to see Marv.
Mm-hmm.
I've already seen Marv, right? And there's nothing that Marv can do that's meaningful right now. So I don't want to see Marv. I want to see Carnell Tate get 60 snaps. I want to see Brandon Ennis get a bunch of work, right? So to me, it's more about that. Jermaine Matthews better play a bunch. Malik Hartford better play a bunch. I want to see that kind of stuff because you're basically, to me, you're flipping the page. Bowl practice, same thing. And they talked about it a little bit Sunday, and that's not rocket science. Start spreading the reps out a little bit differently. And yeah, let's see some guys that are going to be contributors or that you're counting on to be contributors next year. Let's get it going. They should get more, number 1 reps in bowl practice, and they should play a hell of a lot in this game because, again, this is nothing but a springboard to next season, or truly, like I said, really the first game of next season for me as a fan watching it.
Yeah, that's a great point, and I think that's a good way and a fresh way to kind of go into this one. You could choose to be disappointed because, I mean, I'm going to be honest. That's my first thought was, man.
Oh yeah,
all the good dudes aren't going to play. But you're right, man. There's a great opportunity to see what guys like Ennis and Tate and some of these young pups can do out there, and whether Tommy sits, man. There's some linebackers that you're itching to see.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I mean that's a great way to look at it. The field, as far as the CFP was put out, number 1, Michigan, number 2, Washington, number 3, Texas, number 4, Alabama. The big news from that, it seems to have the entire internet mad, is Texas and Alabama jumping Florida State for that 4th spot. The Noles become the first ever unbeaten Power 5 champion to miss the CFP. Of course, that's with quarterback Jordan Travis getting injured late in the season. And they were kind of punished for that because they looked sloppy. They lost their second-string quarterback. They won a couple games in Florida. And then, obviously, they beat Louisville in the ACC championship, but had a ferocious defense. But they were punished a little bit because they lost a star quarterback. And, for me, it's like the CFP did the impossible. It made me, for the first time in my life, feel sorry for Florida State. And I've never been able to do that. So, yeah. I mean, have you? Have you ever felt sorry for Florida State in your life?
I haven't. I guess I still don't feel terribly sad for them. I mean, it's unfortunate what happened for sure, but I don't like the SEC any more than you. But my number 1 goal out of Sunday was Michigan has to lose. hopefully lose in the semifinal, but they have to lose.
Right.
They would smoke Florida State. The rest of the top 8 would be favored heavily against Florida State. And I know that's not the criteria for inclusion. I get it, right? And it's a shame that happened to them. But they had 2 games. Like I've even heard, though, Ohio State got in with Cardale Jones. They won 59-0 with Cardale Jones.
Yeah, they showed
These
something.
guys did nothing. They looked terrible. They beat a bad Florida's 5-7. They got outgained by Florida, and the number 2 quarterback was 12 of 26 for 100 some yards. He was not impressive. And then obviously Brock Glenn, you're not expecting much from him, but they had 219 total yards and completed 8 passes. What do you have? 55 yards passing, I think it was. I mean, I think you saw enough there. The committee saw enough that, hey, even if this second stringer comes back, yes, they have a great defense, but I don't know. I get that it sucks, but I also get it. And admittedly, totally say, like, I'm looking for Michigan to lose. Mm-hmm. What do you think, Michigan? I mean, you saw Michigan's reaction. Do you think?
Oh yeah,
who would they rather play? Right? Like,
that's the only silver lining, man. That footage, the video of them and their reveal party when they found out they played Alabama, and they're all gasping because they thought they were going to get something better. I mean, that's the only silver lining, and it's a tough spot because most of the neutral fans in the nation and journalists will be rooting for Michigan because they're mad that Alabama jumped Florida State. But for Ohio State fans, that's like a bridge too far. I mean, I'm going to have to get some houndstooth for that game and put it on because I just, I'd like to see the Big Ten do well, but I don't want to see Michigan win a national championship in my lifetime if I can avoid it. So
yeah, absolutely. If it was Iowa in there, it'd be a totally different ballgame, right?
Yeah,
but it's not. It's Michigan, and they need to lose, and they need to lose in the semifinal. So,
I agree.
Yeah. So from that standpoint, I loved how it turned out. The other kind of silver lining is I love when something like this happens because then the politicians are all,
I know.
DeSantis is talking about allocating $1 million. Like, stop. Like,
Trump tried to blame it on DeSantis. That was my favorite thing. He got out ahead of it, trying to blame DeSantis for them not getting it, which is like, if you can pin that on someone, more power to you. I don't think that
both sides of the aisle. Like, it's not even that to me. It's just when government thinks, I should probably step in here so I can look good. Like, no, you look dumb. Like, that's dumb.
Yeah.
I don't matter who's doing it.
That bias is real, man. If Alabama had lost their first 2 quarterbacks and sputtered down the stretch and still won their as an undefeated conference champ, they'd be in 100%.
They probably would.
100%. The SEC has kind of earned that, man, with their performance through the last 15 years. But it is what it is. And it doesn't help that ESPN, SEC's biggest partner, controls the CFP for now. You said, politicians are mad, journalists are mad, the ACC's mad, Florida State's obviously pretty mad about it. Do you think Florida State was eager to be looking at getting into the Big Ten right now? You think I know the playoff expands next year, but do you think they're having some hey, this would have never happened if we'd have been part of the Big Ten? 100%.
I mean, that may not have happened, but we beat 2 SEC teams. Yeah, 5-7 Florida, and then LSU. I'll give you LSU, but in the same argument, they want to say, September is so long ago. Like, I don't know. Like I said, I feel bad for them because of what happened to their quarterback.
I do.
But I don't think that in a 4-team playoff that they're one of the 4 best. Like I said, Florida State, Georgia would be favored. Ohio State would be favored. Oregon would be, Ohio State with its, after Michigan roster would be favored. So, sucks for them for sure. But, hey, we'll have 12 teams next year.
It's just so dumb, man. I always laugh about how this is the dumbest sport on earth, but it's also some of that makes it fun and unique. And you have regional stuff and, bands and things you don't have at the pro level. But imagine 10 humans getting together and picking the NFL playoff field. We'd be like, awesome. What the hell? What are you doing? No, it's the only sport in the world that I know of. And for the longest time, it's the only sport in the world that, at least this big of a sport, that didn't crown a champion in any kind of meaningful way. Mm-hmm. And now you've got this. Like you said, gets better next season, expands to 12 teams. Let's look at real quick at what that would look like, because this would be a good year to have a 12-team playoff, right? This year, there's so many wide open games. I mean, Georgia fans would appreciate it, Ohio State fans would appreciate it, obviously Florida State fans would appreciate it. So first round games, and these are on campus around mid-December. Number 9 Missouri at number 8 Oregon. The winner gets number 1 Michigan. That's fun. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Number 12 Liberty at number 5 Florida State. The winner gets number 4 Alabama. I mean, that's the semifinal game everyone wants to see anyway, right there. If they get through,
that's the argument for why 8 teams was plenty, is what that is. But
yeah, number 10 Penn State at number 7 Ohio State. A little bit of a rematch. Winner would play number 2 Washington, and that's one of those things we'll have to watch for in the future. Will the committee, because it's Fox and there'll be others with a seat at the tables, it's still about TV and money. Will they try to avoid rematches? I mean, I assume they might. The other one's number 11, Ole Miss, at number 6, Georgia. Another rematch from the regular season. The winner would play number 3, Texas. So if your favorites won in those first-round games, you'd have Oregon at Michigan. Or, I'm sorry, Oregon versus Michigan, because it would be a neutral site quarterfinal. Florida State, Alabama. Ohio State, Washington. Georgia, Texas. And those final 8, that's all anyone wants, really. I mean, that's it. That's what everyone wants to see, and you'd have the final 8 teams captured. Can't get here soon enough. I think the outrage lessens as the field expands. I think, if I were like a smarter math guy, I'd draw out some formula where, no one cares about the first team that gets out of the dance. I mean, their fans probably care, and maybe a couple other people in their league, but like no one from a national perspective cares about the first team denied from the basketball tournament. So the larger the field, the less the outrage.
Oh, 100%. I don't, especially, like I said, I mean, I feel like most years, this year was interesting, but there's been some years where even picking that 4th team was kind of like, okay.
Yeah.
How good is it? Like Michigan State, like how good is this going to work out for the number 4 team, let alone the number 12 team? So I don't want to hear any whining. What this year would have been? What was Oklahoma? It was Oklahoma and LSU? I think is that who was 12 and 13th this year? I forget what the.
I don't. Yeah, just disregard those guys. If you're 12 and if you're 13th and 14th next year, obviously there's some teams that there's like a G5 qualifier. I mean, I guess Liberty would have got that. So there's some other things that to play through, but can't wait to see it. Can't wait for it to get here. Arguments in the future are going to be about those buys, which I believe will be very, very valuable. I mean,
there's still going to be a lot to play for.
Would you rather play Nick Saban where he's got time to just game plan for you, or do you want him to have to game plan for another game before you in December?
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Like I want him tied up game planning for 2 games, not spending like 25 days looking at my film.
Exactly. Yeah. No doubt.
Yeah. So can't get here soon enough, but help's on its way. I mean, we're old guys, man. We grew up with pre-BCS, then BCS, then the playoff, a 4-teamer, and now a 12-teamer. So we're gradually getting there, just taking a long time. So help's on the way. Let's talk a little bit before we end this one about OSU hoops. And you know who I am, man. I'm a fair weather hoops fan. I hope the team does well all the time, but it's really hard for me to watch games when they're like, a 12th finish in the Big Ten, something in that range, or getting bounced on the first night of the Big Ten tournament. That's a hard thing for me to watch and get into. But this team this year might be a little different, man. They're 8-1, have won 6 straight since losing by 7 to Texas A&M, a pretty good Texas A&M team earlier in the season. And they're doing it with the backcourt, aren't they?
Yeah, definitely doing it with the backcourt. Bruce Thornton and Roddy Gale looking really good. I think Thornton's a little over, almost 20 a game, I think. And then, Roddy's at about 14 and a half. And Jamison Battle, the transfer from Minnesota, is about 14. Definitely kind of a 3-headed monster. But Bruce has been in a class by himself right now. 19.3 points a game, I guess it is. 4.5 assists, less than 2 turnovers. What I'm really impressed with is that he's taking more shots, but he's still shooting like 48% from the field, 40% from 3. You'll definitely take that from a guard, certainly a point guard. And Gale has picked up where he left off. I admit I was a little like, hey, let's not put too much pressure on Roddy because he did have a good tournament. On one hand, you're like, okay, into the season he's been building to that. But on the other, it's like, hey, was that just a hot streak? Or, what expect him to be better this year, but would he exactly picked up where he left off? And what's impressed me the most about him is his shooting. He's shooting like 57% from the floor and 42% from 3, I think it is. So really nice to see what he's been giving them so far. Willing passer, athletic, obviously. Yeah, they haven't played. I know they played Texas A&M. I know Alabama was considered a big win, but if you look at some of the advanced metrics, Alabama refuses to play defense. So you just got to see. And I think Holtmann said as much, Tuesday in his presser, right? Of just need to get a little bit more of a sample size here to see what he's got. Offense has been really efficient, but they've been shooting the lights out. Shooting comes and goes, right? You got to make sure defense is what you can count on every night. And right now, that's probably where their biggest opportunity lies is to pick it up on the defensive end a little bit. But, I certainly admit I'm one of those of cautiously optimistic because we've seen a bunch of good Novembers and a bunch of good Decembers before, only to bottom out when it matters most. So I think for Holtmann, obviously he knows the importance of building up to something, not starting fast and fizzling out. So, basketball's a long season. This is definitely a marathon, not a sprint. So I'll be more interested in how they're doing in February. You got to be encouraged what you've seen so far this year.
And, you mentioned it, the much maligned Chris Holtmann, great guy, awesome dude. But, struggled the last couple years and underperformed and is a guy I would consider very fortunate that he coaches the number 2 sport at the university and not the number 1 sport. But seems to have something going for him this year. 25th in the latest coaches poll, unranked in the AP poll. Would you say they're underranked or kind of underrated at 25th in coaches and unranked in the AP?
I don't know. I think around that 2025 spot is probably where they should be. I mean, again, it's early December, so I don't know how much it matters right now. But I think they're probably kind of a situation where people want to see it for the reasons that I said, because they've seen this before, right? Like, I think you want to see them sustain it a little bit more, get into Big Ten play and see what happens. And obviously the schedule is going to pick up as a result of that. Miami of Ohio later tonight, but you go on the road to Penn State Saturday, and then you have a week off before you take on UCLA. You got West Virginia coming down the pike, and then you really get into that Big Ten season, obviously, with the start of the new year. But I think there's probably a little bit of show me. But I will say, I do feel like the pieces, the top 8 in the rotation, seem like they fit together nicely. The only guy in the top 8 right now that does a lot of other things, but that really is kind of like, all right, we need some more from this guy is Evan Mahaffey, the transfer from Penn State, who is starting, but has really struggled with his shot. They need to get, and again, he plays defense. He does a lot of other things, but you can't be playing 20 minutes a game and shooting 21% from the floor, right? Like he's going to have to, pick that up a little bit. But confidently will. I like the length. I like the length on defense a lot more. And I'm still not sure how on board I am with Zed losing off his weight. I felt like his ass was his biggest strength. Like he could carve out some, room in the paint and work those little hooks he had with either hand, right? Now he's, still rebounding pretty well. So far it seems like it's working out. When he goes against some Big Ten bodies, a little more interested to see how that works. But, with Bruce and Roddy Gale and Jameson and, Akpara's looking really good. Middleton, I think, is probably going to play more and more as the season goes on. If he can play defense to complement his offense as a true freshman and doesn't hit a wall, I wonder if that's something where maybe Mahaffey's minutes will, decrease a little bit and Middleton will kind of pick those up. That might be a nirvana state for this team. But yeah, encouraged with what we see so far. I'm not trying to be a Holtmann naysayer. I got to see more when the calendar flips, right? Like it's got to sustain.
Absolutely. And like you mentioned, Bucks are in action tonight at home against Miami of Ohio, Saturday at Penn State. We'll keep an eye on those. Thanks so much for joining us for this second episode of the 11 Warriors Show. Jason Priestis, Chris Lauterbach. Stick with us. We got guests and a bunch of great things lined up for future episodes. Thank you so much for joining us.